Thank you for having me here. I'm Namrata Barai, and I am with CTEG, the Tech Transfer Office. So just by show of hands, how many of you know what tech transfer is? Okay. And how many of you have worked with your tech transfer office? Okay. So there's a good mix of people who don't know what tech transfer is and some people who have worked with tech transfer office. So I'm going to basically give a very high level overview of what tech transfer is, kind of what the tech transfer office does specifically, and also give you some ideas on what you could do as investigators to maximize your interactions with your tech transfer office. And I'm also going to kind of intersperse some examples which are specific to the biotherapeutics field, just to kind of see how it works within your areas of research. So what is tech transfer? So in the most simplistic manner, it's technology transfer is the process of transferring scientific findings from one organization to another for the purpose of further development and commercialization. So it's essentially, everybody's doing what they're good at. Scientists do research, industry can kind of take it forward and make it into a product and generate revenue. But without, both of them cannot work without each other, and that's what technology transfer tries to do, is make those connections between academia and industry so that your research and your ideas and your fundamental scientific findings can make its way into the real world. So I have a video which kind of talks about the whole process of tech transfer, and hopefully this will give you some more idea about what exactly tech transfer is.
I'm Jane Muir, a technology transfer professional and a member of the Association of University Technology Managers, or AUTM. We're the people who work to transfer the discoveries developed at universities and research centers to companies that can turn them into products and services that benefit society. This process is called technology transfer. Government and private organizations provide funding that supports critical research from which new discoveries are created. Technology transfer professionals work to protect these discoveries and create partnerships to help these discoveries become new products. This sounds simple, but there are many steps involved in taking an idea and turning it into a product. There are many challenges. Some ideas make it, some don't. Sometimes an idea is transferred to an existing company, and sometimes it inspires the creation of a brand new company. These companies turn these ideas into products that have a huge impact on improving lives, creating jobs, and supporting new research discoveries. To learn more about the Autumn Better World project and the many ways that technology transfer is making the world a better place in your community, visit Autumn at autumn.net.
Okay, so that was basically a small introduction and giving you a brief idea of what the vast process of technology transfer is. It's not simple. It takes many, many years to take a research finding from a laboratory to the market, but that's what technology transfer professionals do. Okay. So the next question that many new scientists have is, why should I commercialize? What's the benefits to commercialization? Why should I work with your office when I can just apply for CIHR grants and carry on doing my research, and that's what I want to do. So these are, the top 4 reasons why scientists should think about commercialization. The first one, obviously, is the most obvious one, which is societal benefits. You want your research to have real impact in the world, and for that, commercialization is probably one of the main ways that you can do it. Economic growth. So when we commercialize something, that leads to licensing agreements, it leads to a startup company, so there's a potential to generate revenue through it. There's a potential to create jobs through it if you start a company. And so the government in general is also now focusing a lot on commercialization as a metric to measure how scientists are performing. Industry partnerships. This is one way to gain more funding for your lab. Additional sources of ideas. So, when you interact with other scientists, you get ideas on how to conduct research. When you interact with industry scientists, the perspectives are different. What they're looking for is different, and it can be a meeting of minds there where you can generate new ideas. And they can also be, industry can be a good way to get some additional government grants, because many of the grants now do require an industry partner, and so that's one of the things that you can gain from an industry partnership. And then the last one, which is a little intangible, but it's really important, is if your institution is pro-commercialization and does come out with a number of technologies that make it to the market, it positions your institution as the place to go to for new scientists. It's a great recruitment tool. It's a great way to retain people and bright minds. And so, that's one of the other reasons why commercialization is important. This is something that I always say in my presentations, but I don't really know whether I've made a convincing pitch to people when I say you should commercialize. So what I wanted to do now is just take you through an actual example in the field of biotherapeutics where there was which was a success story for commercialization from an academic lab to industry. So I just wanted to show that video to kind of highlight the academic perspective, the role that the academic hospital, very similar to the Hospital for Sick Children, played in conducting that clinical trial. Emily Whitehead, who was a patient in 2010, was 5 years old when they actually did this clinical trial. So now fast forward to 2017, and that's when the FDA approved this particular CAR-T therapy, Chimeria, for patients in the US, and it's now approved in Europe as well as in Canada. And it's a product that Novartis has. This was the whole clinical trial that was done by Children's Hospital Philadelphia and Novartis was done in collaboration. And so now Novartis has this product on the market for these patients. So this is the whole thing. This is commercialization. Started way back in 2010, maybe before that actually, when the researchers in Philadelphia were actually developing this therapy in their labs, led to the clinical trial in 2010, and then further advancement into a product that now Novartis has for patients. So I just want to tie this back to the benefits of commercialization, because this exact example talks about all those reasons. There's the societal benefits. First gene therapy that's been approved. It's a highly personalized cancer therapy called CAR-T cell therapy. This has now got many opportunities for many more cancers. Talking about economic growth, the pricing for this therapy itself it's actually very high because of the process that's involved. And so part of that revenue that Novartis is making is obviously going back to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. There's a sales and marketing team out there for this product. It all leads back to economic growth. Industry partnerships. This was developed through a collaboration between Novartis and CHOP. CHOP may not have been actually able to develop the clinical trial and do it without Novartis' support. And then the last one, it's positioned CHOP as a leader for cancer immunotherapy now. They're working, Dr. June's lab is working on this area and is developing other CAR-T cell therapies for many other cancers. So this is a prime example for commercialization, and with that I actually want to get into the details of how this process works. What do tech transfer offices do to help this process? And there's 4 different areas or 4 different parts of the process that we work in. The first one is identifying opportunities, then performing due diligence on these opportunities. Then comes the patent protection part, and you've heard some talks this morning about the importance of patents as well as how to do patent searches. And then the last one is commercialization. So these are the 4 areas that our office offers their assistance and help to scientists with. So when it comes to identifying opportunities, what we usually do is we have a more active outreach process to scientists. We try to connect with them early on in their research to understand what they're doing. We are a group, the tech transfer professionals are a group of people who've got a mix of science background as well as business, and so we're able to kind of, sift through some of the ideas and figure out what could have commercial potential. We do educational and informational seminars with scientists to educate them about commercialization, what the process entails. And what we hope that this ends in is a disclosure that the scientists would make to our office about any new findings that they have. Subsequently, what's the investigator's role in this process? What we like to tell scientists is engage with your tech transfer office as early as possible. They have great ideas that can help you in coming up with in developing your technology. If you have a disclosure that you'd like to make, or if you're planning to publish on something that you think has commercial potential, talk to your tech transfer office first, because there is obviously the matter of trying to protect it before you publish. You have to give thought as to who's provided an inventive contribution to your technology, and this is something that comes up in the patent office as well, because inventorship is an important aspect to filing a patent. You have to provide any information to the tech transfer office about any grants that you've used to develop this technology, as that might play a role in terms of whether there's any hooks that the granting agency has on the commercialization or on the IP itself. And so some examples of what a disclosure in the biotherapeutics field would be, and these are actually all active projects in our portfolio at the Tech Transfer Office at SickKids, so I just thought I'd put them up here. But a novel gene therapy approach to treat disease. This could be CRISPR editing techniques or some other form of gene therapy. Novel antimicrobial peptides and enzymes for infectious diseases. And a vaccine that has a novel delivery system and a particular composition. Pluripotent stem cell derived human alveolar-like macrophages, so to cell therapy for particular disease. And then, nowadays there's a lot of interest in the whole exosome secretome area, so that's another area that could be a potential disclosure. So the next step is, we perform our due diligence. So you come to us, you disclose your idea. It's not possible for us to take on every single project, or for a tech transfer office to take on every single project or disclosure that comes to us. And so what we do before we file a patent or to make it an active project is we would perform a series of due diligence activities on that. And what that means is, we confirm what the ownership rights are. Is all the work being done at the institution, or are there other inventors, external inventors on this? Do a patentability assessment. Is it novel? Is it obvious? Is it, does it have utility? All those criteria that come into play for patentability. What's the prior art on this? Are there other groups that are working on this, that have published on this, and does this kind of make it difficult for us to make the claims that we'd like to make? And then has the work been disclosed publicly already? There's some ways that we can play with that. Obviously, there's a 1 year one-year window that we have in the US, but we prefer that the disclosure to us is made before it has been made publicly. And then the last one is the market. We like to kind of have a market pull approach to picking our technology. So is there an interest, or is there a need, an unmet need for this in the market right now? And if so, is this filling a gap that's much required? And so all of these things go into figuring out whether this is something that the Tech Transfer Office would like to take on as an active project. If it does, then obviously we'd work with the scientists to develop a strategy and file a patent and then commercialize it. As part of the due diligence process, we do have some requirements from the investigator as well to kind of help with this process. And so this is what would be asked of you as investigators to do for us when we're trying to do our due diligence. Be available to meet with the Tech Transfer Office to discuss your invention and explain it to the Tech Transfer Office in kind of lay terms so that we understand. answer questions such as what is the unmet need, why is your technology better, and these are questions that scientists are not usually used to answering, and so you have to start thinking a little differently when it's a technology that you're trying to commercialize. Why is your technology better? What is the market, and how many patients would this help? Are there other companies and academics working in this area? And then the last point is actually a very important point, because commitment to the process. The Tech Transfer Office cannot work on commercializing a technology without the help of the scientists, and the scientists cannot do it without the Tech Transfer Office. So it is a true partnership, and we count on the scientists to make scientific pitches, to build the technology, to further improve upon it, and what we offer is we bring the industry partners to the table, and we can help in the negotiation and the business discussions around it. So when we're doing our due diligence specific to biotherapeutics, these are some of the challenges that we encounter. One of them is feasibility to translate the findings to clinics. It's much harder, obviously, when it's a naturally derived or a cell therapy based technology to translate it rather than a small molecule. One of the things in one of our technologies, which is a stem cell based technology, when they did the work, they did it in the mouse stem cells. They were able to generate these mouse stem cells for alveolar macrophages. Converting that or translating that into the humans was a different thing, and so doing that, whether that's possible. Prior art, so patents in general are always filed to cover broad claims. So is there a freedom to operate for us? One of the examples that we're dealing with right now is exosomes to treat disease, because people have patented exosomes to treat disease. So is there space for us to operate in that landscape, or do we have to focus on any specific cargo that the exosomes are delivering? So those are the kinds of things that we kind of think about. Market, biotherapeutics are much more expensive to develop and deliver, as you saw from the Chimeria example. It's not a straightforward process as you develop a pill and you sell it. And then market trends and pulls. We always try to get industry feedback early on in the process through non-confidential presentations, and we talk to partner organizations as well, such as CCRM, Mars Innovation, to kind of get a sense of is this something that we think industry might be interested in. So the next step is obviously patent protection, and I've put patent protection on there, but it's actually IP protection. There are different ways to protect your IP. Patent is one of them. There's trade secret, and sometimes if it's being in a hospital, we see a lot of copyright stuff as well, which is not really relevant to biotherapeutics, but just wanted to make sure that it's IP protection. So the Tech Transfer Office pays and manages the patent application process. So at this point, I should actually just say that this is specific to SickKids, obviously. All institutions have their own IP policy, and the IP policy determines who owns the technology. Does the inventor own the technology? Does the institute own the technology? Some institutes have an inventor-owned policy, by which means that you as an inventor would own it, and then it's up to you whether you want to work with your Tech Transfer Office, in which case these things would apply again. But at SickKids and at some other institutes, it is an institution-owned policy. So if you develop anything at SickKids, the institution would own it. So maybe that's something you should look into as well, as if you're interested in commercialization, is find out what the IP policy at your institute is. But in general, if the Tech Transfer Office takes this on as an active project, then they will pay for and manage the patent process. We are not patent agents, essentially, in the Tech Transfer Office, and so we engage with external patent agents to file, to guide, and to advise on the patent application process. We then work with the inventors to develop a patent strategy. So if it's a platform technology, for example, there would be a broad platform technology on how to deliver an antibody, and then each of the antibodies might be separate compositions and separate patents. So that's how you build a patent portfolio, and you could develop licensing strategies around that. And then we work very closely with the inventors to kind of, the patent application is the first step, but to getting to an issued patent is a long process. And so trying to work through that, meeting all the deadlines for office actions and communications with the patent office and the patent agent is something that our office kind of works through and helps the inventor with. So what's the investigator's role in this, at this step during patent protection? It's actually quite a lot, because this is where we want to make sure that we have a strong patent application, and that covers everything and all the eventualities that we can think of. We want the investigator to meet with the patent agent to draft patent claims. If there is a publication that's being planned to disclose, and that's the ideal situation, because then we can use the manuscript to file a patent and to draft the claims around that. But if there isn't one, then coming up with a slide deck or writing out a report which provides the description of the invention becomes important. And then during the first year, at least, you can go in and add more data as you want. So if there is some interesting data that's come up, we want to know about it immediately so that we can then communicate that with the patent agent. Review office actions when they're received and provide responses prior to the deadline. That can be a big task as well, because depending on the patent, it could be one office action or many. And so we have to work on that as well. Review the prior art that's been identified. So our office actually does the prior art searches, but then we would look at the scientists, look at the scientists for help to review it and to differentiate their invention from what's already out there. Some of the other things are, it's in terms of patenting, everybody knows that composition of matter patents are much more valuable than method of use. So we try to kind of push our scientists in cases where it's possible, when there's a new drug target, we would prefer that they have tool compounds or that they've done some screening so that we can then protect the compounds itself. Platform technologies are very valuable to build a patent portfolio, like I just mentioned. And the last thing, which I think is also important, is that, it's important for scientists and investigators to understand that sometimes tech transfer offices have to make hard decisions to not pursue a patent, and that's not a wrap on the technology itself, but it's just because we don't have unlimited resources and cannot pursue all the technologies or all the disclosures that come to the tech transfer office. So again, some examples of what can be patented in the biotherapeutic space. Delivery platforms for vaccines and therapeutic antibodies, novel methods to generate or deliver exosomes, novel ways to deliver gene therapy, plasmids, etc., methods to generate T cells, and some novel receptors for cancer immunotherapy. So these are just some examples, but I just thought it would be helpful to see what some of these patents might look like, what you might be able to file patents on. And the final step in the commercialization process is commercialization itself. So once we filed a patent, that's when we start kind of actively looking for partners. So like the initial video said, there's two different streams that we could pursue for commercialization. One is we would license the technology to an existing company, in which case, we'd go out, we go to conferences, we develop pitch decks, and we try to engage with potential partners, and then execute a licensing deal with them. And the other opportunity is to start a company from scratch around the technology, in which case we would have to look for investors, try to find seed money, try to find somebody to run the company, an entrepreneur in residence, and things like that. So that's a different model, but both of them kind of require us to negotiate licensing agreements with the company that's either created or existing. And then the management process, which is, once you've done the deal, you still have to make sure that the licensee is fulfilling all their obligations. The last thing we want, and that's something that we enforce quite diligently, is that the licensee acquires the technology and just puts it on a shelf. Our main goal is to try to create benefit and create impact and make sure that the technology gets to the market. And for that, we need our licensee to meet the milestones, the developmental milestones, and do what they've committed to do to take the technology further. So that's something that we do, is monitor that, ensure that that happens. Once they've started generating revenue, we get royalties or whatever the agreement, the consideration is for the technology. So that's something that we manage. And any revenue that we generate comes back into the research, goes back into the research. Part of it is shared with the inventors as part of the IP policy. So In this particular phase as well, the investigator plays a very important role. They have to be available to present to companies. There's multiple pitches that have to be made, and it's the best when it comes from the scientist. We would work together to come up with a robust pitch, but it's best if they kind of give it, and that can be very time consuming. If the scientist goes to a conference, meets a company, we ask that they come and tell us immediately about it, because we want to make sure that any engagement with companies are managed properly. There's no conversations that happen without a confidentiality agreement. There's no transfer of information or materials that happen without a material transfer of agreement. I mean, this happens all the time. Even though we try to educate scientists as much as we can, this happens very often, and so we want to try and avoid it as much as possible. And as I said, institutions all have policies on what their IP policy is, what the startup policy is. There's conflict of interest. If you're planning to work with a company, you have to be careful about conflict of interest, and there's policies around that. And when you do all these company pitch, when you pitch to a company, you invariably always get feedback. And so that's the other thing that we look to the investigator to do, is to take some of that feedback back and, if possible, improve upon the technology, so that then in the next iteration we have better success when we take it back to the company. And the last examples here are, what are some of the other success stories in terms of commercialization other than the Chimeria example. So the Chimeria one is the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to Novartis, and then there is a few others. The last three are actually Canadian examples where there's been either a license agreement from an academic lab to a company or a startup. So there has been successes. There's obviously right now, in terms of cancer immune cell therapy, there's only one successful product in the market, but the time is right, and there's a lot of interest in this space, and so there's obviously going to be a lot more in the future in this space. And I think there's one last slide. So that's the licensing model, or the commercialization model of how to work with tech transfer offices. But most tech transfer offices also do a little bit of everything. We help with writing the commercialization plans for grants. That's something that PIs come to us all the time for. We help with making connections with industry. So you may not have a fully baked invention yet, but you have an idea that you think a company might be interested in, and you want to approach a company. We can help make some of those connections and facilitate some of those introductions. Many academic institutes are now going the model of having an internal innovation fund. This is one way of keeping the technology internal, so that you can build it up a little bit more, add value to it, and take it out and market it at a stage when it's ready, and you would get a better deal essentially out of it. So the internal innovation funds, which are managed by the institute itself, is something that we could help. You should find out about if your institute has. And the last one is entrepreneurs in residence. So we do consult and get people who have experience to come and help with startup companies, and that's what an entrepreneur in residence would do. With that, I will take any questions.